These people just sound like they sound the same as the non-Muslims, who constantly repeat, "Why don't Muslims condemn terrorism?" every time there's any kind of an attack. When in reality, Muslims everywhere are falling over each other to try to get to a microphone just to condemn and to denounce terrorism. But no matter how many times Muslims condemn and denounce terrorism, there are some people who will never hear it. They don't hear it not because it isn't being said, but because they're deaf. They have a biased deafness, a deafness that's from their own bias. And the same is true for all these people who are constantly repeating, why are the Muslim countries, why are the Muslim leaders all silent? Why are the Arab countries, why are the Arab regimes saying nothing about Palestine? Why are they doing nothing? It's because you're not listening. Because you're not listening, you think nothing is being said. But it wouldn't matter really, even if you were listening, because you have the same biased deafness that non-Muslims have with regards to Muslims condemning terrorism. You have a biased blindness, so you can't see what's going on. I mean, for whatever reason, there are people who treat their own presumptions and their own preconceived biases as if they're actual reliable sources of information. And so they automatically reject actual information if it doesn't conform with their biases. I mean, the information must be false because their biases can't possibly be wrong. Obviously, this isn't analysis. These aren't serious people. And you have people, among the Muslims, we have people who, like I said before, they seem to think that it's a sign of wisdom and intelligence, not to mention righteousness, to denigrate the Arab and Muslim rulers. So they're going to do that no matter what the rulers do. They'll denigrate them no matter what the rulers do. If the rulers do something wrong, then they will blame them without mercy. But if the rulers ever do something right, then they'll find a way to make it wrong. They'll make excuses for the ruler when they do something right. Excuses in the form of arguing that their intention was bad. Maybe they did the right thing, but their intention was bad. Or they only did the right thing against their will. They make no excuses for the bad. They make no excuses for the bad that a ruler might do, but they make excuses for the right things, for the good things. It's pathological. There are so many people who have like MBS derangement syndrome, just like they used to talk about with Trump. Bin Salman derangement syndrome, Mohammed bin Zayed derangement syndrome. And it prevents them from having any sense of objectivity or impartial understanding of the world. And in fact, anyone who is objective, they will berate them as a fanboy or an apologist. Why, they're just as dishonest, really, as Zionists, to be frank. The belief that all the leaders are terrible and hypocrites and horrible and evil and all of that, that's like doctrine to them. It's almost blasphemy for them if you acknowledge or recognize any good that the leaders might do. It's a mental malfunction in people's intellect. And of course, like I've said before, this benefits no one but the West. Getting rid of this bias blindness is part of decolonizing the collective psyche of the Muslims, in my opinion. Look, no one has done more than the Arab states since October 7th. You won't see it, you won't acknowledge it, because all you have in your head is that they're supposed to declare war on Israel. And anything short of that is just nothing to you. You don't acknowledge anything else that they might do. And all I can say about that is, alhamdulillah, that you're not in charge of a state, and inshallah, you never will be. Look, this is the real world, and the leaders are dealing with the real world as it actually is. They're navigating realities as they actually are. And they're not only trying to stop the carnage in Gaza, they're trying to make sure that it doesn't spread across the whole region. Look, Saudi Arabia has been engaged in non-stop diplomacy since October 7th with Russia, with China, with all the BRICS nations, with Iran, Lebanon and Hezbollah, with Qatar and Hamas, Jordan, Egypt. They had a meeting with ASEAN and the GCC, which was like the first time that they ever had a meeting like that. They're consolidating a united front, and not just a united Arab front, but a united front for the entire global South, a united BRICS front. And they're shutting out the Americans. Blinken, Anthony Blinken, is getting shunned wherever he goes in the Middle East. No one wants to see him. And when he can get a meeting, it doesn't go well. It's only because of Arab mediation and negotiation and diplomacy that any aid has entered Gaza. And it's only because of their coordinated, unified stance that the U.S. Had to back down from the demand that Gazans be expelled into Egypt on the pretext that expelling them to Egypt would be temporary. They didn't just backtrack from that demand, they did a 180. It's only because of Arab coordination and diplomacy that the war hasn't already spread to Lebanon and to Iran. The artillery that the U.S. Brought into the Mediterranean, that was for Iran, not for anything else. That was for Iran. And it's because of their coordination that China sent their own ships into the Mediterranean as a counterweight. Saudi Arabia is referring to the Israeli government in their official communiques as an occupation government. And the Arab states are behind the push for an international peace conference that was announced last week or a few days back by China to try to wrestle control of the resolution process to the Palestinian situation, to try to wrestle control of that away from the United States and away from the West. That's not to mention the literally billions of dollars that they've provided in aid and relief for Gaza, not just from the government, but from the populations. And that's more than anyone else. You don't have any idea what's going on. I mean, when you talk about Saudi Arabia like it's a puppet of the West, like it's a puppet of the United States, or you couldn't say anything that would more immediately expose the fact that you have no idea what's happening and that you live in a world of your own biases. An actual reality is something that you don't even bother checking on. You don't even look into it because you think that your biases and your prejudices and your preconceived notions and bigotries are actual reliable sources of information. You know, all of this has a background. All of these efforts and what has made these efforts effective, that all has a backstory. And if you've been paying attention, you would know it. It's all grown out of what I've been saying for a long time now, which is that the Gulf states, particularly Saudi Arabia and the UAE, but Qatar as well, to some extent, all of these countries, all of these GCC states have been masterfully and cunningly, and yes, sometimes ruthlessly, expanding their spheres of influence across the region and beyond the region. And they've been doing it for years now. They've been building that for years. They've built partnerships, they've built alliances, they've built dependencies. They've asserted their presence and become a force to be reckoned with and a force to be respected. And again, they've done all of this right at the time when the center of the global economy is shifting to the south and to the east. At a time when the post-World War II world order is being dismantled. They've anticipated the repercussions of that shift, and they've positioned themselves accordingly. You can like it or not, you can recognize it or not, you can acknowledge it or not, it doesn't matter. That's what's happening. And it has made a significant difference, and it is making a significant difference. Had they not done what they've done over the past decade or so, I mean, the UAE has been doing it for longer. They've been building this for longer, but let's just say for the last decade. If they had not done what they've done, you would not see Egypt today standing up to America. You wouldn't see Jordan standing up to America. You wouldn't see the U.S. Secretary of State getting doors slammed in his face all across the Middle East, everywhere he goes. You would see complete and total capitulation to U.S. and Israeli demands. You would see a revival of the coalition of the willing, all lined up to bomb Gaza like it was Baghdad in 2003. And you'd probably already be seeing Tehran being blasted to pieces in another shock and awe campaign. But you see, one of the things that they've done in the process of this building their or expanding their sphere of influence was to win over the Western owners and controllers of global financialized capital, the OCGFC. Mohammed bin Salman has built a relationship with BlackRock. And I believe that he has sold them on his vision for the Middle East. They've done a cost-benefit analysis, and they've concluded that Israel's old traditional role as a source of disruption and instability in the region is not viable anymore. It was only ever really lucrative for a handful of economic interests, and it only really worked in the context of the previous global order, the post-World War II order, which is, as I said, being dismantled. So in my opinion, the OCGFC are done with Zionism. And if the OCGFC are done with Zionism, then it means Zionism is done. I mean, when bin Salman said that the Middle East is going to be the new Europe, it's because Europe is already irrelevant. And there has to be some kind of Europe in this new world, in this new world where the center of gravity for the global economy is no longer in the West. There has to be some replacement for Europe, for Europe's role. And the GCC has the money. I mean, in just their sovereign wealth funds, the GCC has more than 7 times the entire GDP of the whole EU. And just the GCC countries, their GDP is more than 3 times the size of the EU GDP. So they have the money, and they have the will, and they have the vision to develop the Middle East into a thriving, prosperous, stable, and managerial region for the new global economy. And they're in a position, uniquely, to mediate the competing interests between the OCGFC, the Western OCGFC, and China and Russia, which is something that BlackRock cannot do on their own because of the way that Russia and the way that China manage their economies. There needs to be a third party. So they built all this. They've navigated the power dynamics in such a way that they've been able to build, as I've said before, a kind of empire from soft power, an empire of soft power. And yes, part of that was normalizing with Israel by the UAE, and part of that was gestures towards normalization by Saudi Arabia. All of it was a part of that. All of that is a part of that plan. Although I think that if you were really paying attention, you would recognize that bin Salman was just teasing the possibility of normalization, and he wasn't actually serious about normalizing at this time. It was just the right time to tease the idea as a way of moving Israel into a more useful, advantageous position for Saudi Arabia. Because look, Netanyahu he's not going to survive. Hardline Zionist fanatics are not going to survive. They're obsolete. Their software can't be updated. I mean, to get hardline Zionists on board with the new plan would be like trying to install an Android operating system into a beeper. They have to go. You're going to see a new government in Israel after all of this, maybe under a Benny Gantz or someone else, someone who's smart enough and rational enough and who can discern which way the wind is blowing to draw down the crazy Zionist, radical, genocidal fantasies that Netanyahu has stupidly and cynically made his political bread and butter. And there's going to be a peace process, and there will be final status negotiations. But they're going to be held under the auspices of the Global South, under the auspices of BRICS. It will be an international initiative, not a U.S.-led sham of a peace process. And Israel won't be able to bully and dominate that process the way they did last time. And just watch, it won't be long before Jordan severs its ties with Israel, before their peace agreements with Israel are nullified. And don't be surprised if the same thing is going to happen with Egypt. And the purpose of that is to nullify those agreements so that new agreements can be made with new conditions, because those old agreements were made under the gun. They were made under duress. And the new agreements will be made from a better and stronger, bargaining position. And again, that's being made possible by all of these efforts by the Arab states, by the GCC states, the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar. All of the efforts that they've made over the last several years to build their sphere of influence. That's going to enable those old agreements to be nullified and new agreements to be made in a more advantageous manner. You know, when Hassan Nasrallah gave his speech last Friday, I would say that the text of that speech was cleared by Riyadh and Moscow. No one's going to let Hassan Nasrallah just wing it at a time like this. And that whole speech was against escalation. It was against the spreading of the conflict, trying to avoid spreading of the conflict. You know, Russia and Saudi Arabia have been actively engaging in communication and diplomacy with Iran. I wouldn't be surprised if when the Houthis launch drones and missiles against Israel, it's precisely for the purpose of letting Saudi Arabia shoot them down. Now, I don't mean that the Houthis know that, but it wouldn't surprise me if Iran and Saudi Arabia know that that's why those drones and missiles are launched, precisely to get shot down. And the point is to display and prove their commitment, Saudi Arabia's commitment, to de-escalation. Oh, I think that they're being masterfully strategic right now. And the stakes are incredibly high. Now, the horrible thing, obviously, the unbearable thing, is that in all of this, while all of these efforts are being made and while all of these coordinated plans are being put into motion, Gazans are being killed. The massacres are ongoing, and this is agonizing for anyone with a heart, for anyone with natural human feeling. So we all feel that the leaders, whatever they're doing, it isn't enough, because it hasn't stopped the killing. But the fact of the matter is that they are doing a lot. And people everywhere are doing a lot. Obviously, none of us can be satisfied. And we have to continue to do as much as we can. But I don't think that denigrating the Muslim and Arab rulers is helpful or fair. And it actually only undermines the efforts that they are making. The future of the global South, the future of the world, in fact, it's not hyperbole to say it, the future of the world hinges on Gaza. The worldwide protest against Zionist colonialist brutality is developing into a worldwide rejection of Western imperialism, and particularly Western corporate imperialism, which is the main manifestation of imperialism in the world today. People everywhere are focusing their activism, their resistance, and their opposition to Israel. They're focusing that activism on Western private sector entities like Starbucks or McDonald's or Coca-Cola or what have you. They're boycotting Western companies and brands that are associated with Israel and associated with support for Zionism. They're doing this more than focusing on governments. And it's sending a message to the OCGFC, to the owners and controllers of global financialized capital. It's sending them a message that will further cement for them in their minds that the pivot to the global South cannot be overtly colonialist and imperialistic in nature and imperialistic in tone and in character. People are turning away from those Western companies and those Western brands, and in the process, they're boosting their local companies. They're boosting their local shops and cafes and restaurants, their local products, and their local manufacturers. They are exercising from their domestic economies those predatory Western corporations. Wallahi, Gaza is liberating the entire global South from Western supremacy. And inshallah, bi'idhnillah, the global South, by means of their protest and opposition, will help to liberate Gaza from that same Western supremacy once and for all.